The shilling obviously was the major focus in 2011 and continues to be a strong performer in 2012. So all efforts by way of interest rates, by way of reverse repos, by way of stabilizing rates on the interbank market are working. Experts are saying it's good to keep the shilling stable, but you need to focus on other areas of the market. The capital markets need a little bit of impetus.
Yes, good afternoon. Yes, I do agree with the assessment. And yes, the measures that have been taken by the central bank are bearing fruit in terms of the shilling strengthening against the major world currencies. And yes, we are seeing most of the strengthening actually coming through because of the expected 600 million borrowing by the government. But yes, we're seeing more focus on the real sectors as more investments are being directed towards the real sectors of the economy.
Okay, you talk about increased borrowing by the government. Let's talk about news that the finance minister has stepped down. Uhuru Kenyatta, because of the ICC indictment at The Hague, has now bowed to pressure to step down, but he retains his position as Deputy Prime Minister. I want you to explain that to me. Is he stepping away from the finance portfolio because he doesn't want to impact on Kenya's ability to borrow, the perceptions of the country internationally?
Well, I think it's a combination of both, and definitely yes, especially at this critical point when the government is actually looking at reducing its domestic borrowing and seeking more of long-term borrowing from the international markets. So maybe by him stepping aside, yes, it does create that confidence, but also looking at it from the critical nature of the finance docket for the Kenyan economy, then it does make sense for him to step aside and leave someone else who can spend a lot of time looking at the measures that need to be put in place, as opposed to him who will spend a bit of time now looking at defending his case at the ICC.
Will his staying on as Deputy Prime Minister not have a negative bearing on Kenya in any way?
Looking at the role of the Deputy Prime Minister, I would say it's more of an official role as opposed to a critical role that requires him to sign off on documents that would affect government spending or government borrowing. Right. So the critical docket that he was holding was the finance ministry and not the Deputy Prime Minister position. Okay,
let's go back to the markets, and we've seen some very good performance on the part of Crown Badger. The petrochemicals manufacturer up 9.3%, Express Kenya up 6.7%, SGL up 4.7%. I mean, whenever we see these numbers, analysts always caution us to not get excited. Volumes remain thin.
I would agree with you specifically for the counters that you've mentioned. Historically, all three counters, that's Crown Badger and Express, actually have very minimal free float in the market. But I would say so far this year, even to look at the counters that trade huge volumes, so your 10 large cap counters, by the end of last week, they were up by 1% cumulatively on average. And we've seen volumes picking up across the large caps. And we've seen actually foreign investors accounting for 50% of the market, and to date up to $7.6 million inflow from foreigners. So yes, there's a bit of momentum in the market, and this is also being felt in the more liquid large caps.
Okay, the more liquid large caps, and of course Safaricom remains the darling of foreign investors. We've seen that stock rise 1.6%. It's not a big jump, and it's still trading at 3 shillings 15. So still a lot needs to be done by way of share price recovery for Safaricom, but nonetheless, it's retained its status as the most valued, most capitalized stock on the NSE. Why is that?
I would say it only regained that status because if you look at the performance of the NSE in 2011, East African Breweries was the most capitalized company at the Nairobi Stock Exchange, followed by Safaricom. But for the first 3 weeks of this year, we've seen strong trading on Safaricom. It's actually, from January to date, it's up 11%. So it's only the gains that it's been able to record this year that has propelled it back to the most capitalized company at the Nairobi Securities Exchange.
Kenya as an investment destination, obviously we saw that report coming through yesterday internationally that basically says that the top 2 destination hotspots in Africa this year are going to be Nigeria and Kenya. Kenya came as a bit of a surprise, considering that the market fell by 30% in the last year, considering that the political risk sentiment is going to weigh heavily over the country this year ahead of elections and the ICC and all these other issues. What makes Kenya attractive, though?
I would say what makes Kenya attractive, for starters, if I look at the prices in the equity market, 27% year-to-date down 2011. We're yet to see earnings for 2011. Anticipation is that earnings will be strong, at least going with what we had seen up to the third quarter. So we are looking at the market trading at a price-to-earnings ratio on 2010 earnings of, on average, of eight times, compared to 18 times in 2010. So that in itself makes assets attractive. If I look at the political front, I think the stepping aside of the finance minister and the secretary to the cabinet actually shows that there's a bit of political maturity starting to take root in Kenya. So those two things combined, I would say, are the key things that make the Kenyan market attractive.